welcome to the Steps to Happiness show on Soulivity TV. I'm your host, Teresa Greco, happiness coach, author, editor, writer, educator, and Reiki master. Are you ready to feel the love, peace, and happiness that exists within you? Then the Steps to Happiness show is for you. On my show, my guests and I explore the latest physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being practices that can help you to realign with the happiness within you. The happiness principle for today's show is we are powerful creators. There's a quote by Maya Angelou that says, "My mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style." As spiritual beings having a human experience, we didn't come to Earth to just survive. We came here to flourish and thrive, knowing what we are. Powerful creators made in the likeness of our Creator. What we also knew before coming here was that we weren't going to have a fairy tale life filled with only laughter and good times. How would our soul learn, grow, and expand if we didn't have trials and tribulations to show us more about ourselves and the innate gifts we have that the challenge allowed us to discover? There is an innate potential for greatness within us that many of us aren't even tapping into because we've allowed our limiting beliefs about ourselves and what we can accomplish to stand in the way of us creating the life we were destined for. Many of us allowing fear, doubt, and unbelief in ourselves to squash our dreams, saying things like, "I can't. It won't happen for me. Is this all there is? I have to. But what if?" All of these powerless statements that stifle the creator within and cause us to shrink and languish in our lives. We are only a small part of all of creation, and yet we are all part of the same energy that is in everything that we see and also in that which we cannot detect with our five senses. Quantum physics tells us that nothing in this universe is solid and that life is more of an energy flow. Some refer to this as the ether, the essence of the universe, a flow of electromagnetic waves that permeate all matter and space. So, if everything is made up of this same essence, could it be plausible that this energy makes all of us one with each other and the universe, and therefore interdependent? On today's show, we're going to be speaking with a unique guest who has developed a program based on 12 natural skills that all successful living systems have used to emerge from crisis and thrive. We're going to be discussing how science is beginning to prove something that we as spiritual beings already know, that we are thriving, interconnected, sustainable species with healthy, balanced systems and structures that are supporting us all the time. So please join me for this amazing episode after this short break.
Have you ever asked the question, if I was to be anything, what would I be? Regardless of money, regardless of status, beyond popularity and fame. Living your passion, feeling your life has purpose. Soulivity is a space to nurture that which lives in all of us. A place where work can become play, and doing what we love creates the dreams of a lifetime.
Welcome back to the Steps to Happiness show. Let me introduce my guest. She's a well-being educator, writer, coach, and the founder of For Evolution and the Center for Corporate Evolution. Valerie Vandermeer, hello and welcome to the show.
Hi, Teresa. I'm happy to be here.
So, we have not had a show like this ever really in any of the seasons of the Step to Happiness where we've looked at how science is catching up with spiritual beliefs that there are certain things that maybe we've held on to hope about, or there's an inner knowing or a trust that certain spiritual beliefs that we've had throughout the ages, that masters and sages and various people have spoke about throughout history, and that now science is starting to catch up with some of that in epigenetics, in quantum physics, and also through your program. So I'm excited to have you on today where we can talk about how science is starting to meld together with some of the spiritual things that I would say, knew to be true. So if you could give us a little bit of an overview of your 12 skills program, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Teresa. That was a great introduction because it's such an exciting time. It's easy to get discouraged by what's happening in the world, but when you start to see science and spirituality and wisdom traditions come together, I can't help but be thrilled to witness this and be part of it. So I'm not a scientist. I think that's the first thing I need to say. But I was a spiritual seeker and a spiritual educator for many years. And then I met a woman named Elizabeth Sahtouris, who is a world renowned evolution biologist. And she started sharing some information with me about how species evolve and eventually learn to thrive. And the more she spoke, the more excited I got about this material. And I thought, wow, this explains so much. It really creates a framework for understanding who we are as beings, and that the future can be very hopeful. We just need to access our evolutionary potential and learn how to use it in the world. And it's in us, it's baked into our DNA. But it's
Mhm.
more exciting and more powerful if we focus in and start to learn methodically, okay, this is what it means to be an interrelated species, and these are the things we have to learn how to put into our behaviors to bring out the best in ourselves individually, in our businesses, in our organizations, and throughout humanity. So I get very excited with an opportunity to talk about these skills. So I can tell
Mhm.
you where the skills themselves came from if you'd like. Uh,
Sure.
Elizabeth, yeah, her work is fascinating. We all think of evolution as Darwinism, and it is true that there is something called, the strongest survives kind of a thing. But Elizabeth uncovered that there's something called a maturation process in evolution. So younger species compete for resources, and that was the phase that we have been coming out of. So, sure, only the fittest survive when you're a young species and you haven't matured yet. And you don't know the fullness of your potential as an integrated being. But as a species matures, it gets to a point where it starts to really fully utilize all the tools at its disposal, and it learns to thrive. And when I first met her, it was a little scary because she was very clear that all species follow a certain path, get to a certain point where they're in crisis. And when they hit crisis, they either learn these attributes or they die out. And so humanity kind of sat at that crossroads for a while. But she feels fairly confident that the signs are there, that we are now emerging and showing signs of evolutionary maturity and learning these very important skills. So I took the science behind it, I took the attributes, and I turned them into skills that I thought anyone could understand because really they were a little bit heady and academic. So I turn them into things like, I know myself, I manage myself, I adapt to stress. These are things that anyone can access and understand. And the magic to them is that they're not preconceived. They're doorways to walk through. So I don't have a template to implement with clients. I have a conversation to engage clients with, and I have ideas for us to co create with, because no one creates evolution. We all co create evolution. So we have to start by coming together and realizing that we're all part of this one being called humanity, and make that as real to us as our individual reality is. So that's where we start
Mhm.
from.
All right, amazing. So, one of the things I just want to highlight is that part of your program is about coming from like out of crisis and then thriving. And that we are, so I've listened to Marianne Williamson in some of her very latest talks where she talks about how humanity is in a crisis time right now, that we are actually turning on each other and things are getting quite ugly. And that a lot of what we're feeling when we look around and things are starting to crumble, and it's like, what is going on right now? Like, what is it that, this doesn't seem to be working and these people are dying and this is suffering? And it just seems like we're going through a time where there is a lot of natural disaster going on, like even with nature, but, within ourselves, that, mental health is at a crisis situation, relationships, like it's a lot that seems to be all coming to a head. And she speaks a lot about this lately, saying that just like cells in the body are all individual cells, but all the cells are all working together in a unique microcosm. Like all of us are all working together, in the microcosm of humanity here on earth, that we are all part of like an energy, like a deep inner knowing of what we have to do to survive. And that we duplicate, we make, we procreate, we create, we co-create with each other. Like all of these skills that we seem to have like lost our way, and people are more apt to hurt each other and to say terrible things, and yeah, because people have lost their way. So I really believe that we are in a crisis situation along with her, and it's important for us to learn about how how do we thrive, because as powerful creators that we are, the true essence of who we are is powerful. But again, we've lost our way. We don't even believe those things about ourselves. And so, what would you say to some of that?
Well, first, I'd say I agree with you. It's very important to not minimize the real human impact of being in global crisis. And we are in global crisis. And there are terrible things that emanate from that on an individual, personalized level. And I think sometimes spiritual teachers kind of gloss over that a little bit, and don't want to really reside in that and feel the pain that that brings people. And so I'm grateful that you've brought that up. I think that's very important. But it's equally important to kind of begin to learn the skills of living in the micro and the macro. Because when we understand ourselves as a cell in the body of humanity, our perspective automatically changes. So it is very difficult to solve those problems that are emerging from this, over competition of resources. And it's kind of like, teenage years. Humanity is coming out of their teenage years. And I feel a little bit bad saying that about teenagers, because there are great teenagers. So let's just wipe that aside. But it's this turbulent time, and it's very helpful to address crisis and to understand what's going on, because it was sort of like when I met Elizabeth and she started explaining all this stuff, it was like someone gave me the answers to the test of life. Like, okay, we're really mucking this up. I can see we're really mucking this up. What are the answers? And then you realize, okay, here are the answers. You learn to do these 12 things. You learn them personally in your life. You learn them in your organizations, and you learn to express them, to recognize them, to celebrate them when they show up in the world, so that you can connect with them and empower them. And that is where I put my trust. That is where I put my hope. And that is what has really kept me when I am observing sorrow and challenge and pain and difficulty, to not kind of sink into myself and feel hopeless, because I
Mhm.
understand, I've been given these keys to the kingdom, so to speak, and I understand that we have the capacity within us. It's not even like we have to teach ourselves. We just have to activate it. We just have to find the framework so we can look within and express without and understand it. Now, it's really interesting because I did something over the last year, that didn't start out intentional, but it turned out to be really, really powerful, and it relates to things falling apart. So when things fall apart, you do lose your way, and it can cause a lot of pain and conflict, but also it opens up. So if you know your way and you stick to your way, you're not doing anything different. And we have to do
Mhm.
different things to have a different result, both personally and for the world. So this losing our way, yeah, there's a lot of fallout around it. There's a lot of fear around it. There's a lot of conflict around it. But it must happen for us to find our way. So over the
Mhm.
last year, I've hardly worked. I stepped away completely. I got several big projects related to these 12 skills ready to launch, and then I just stopped because my intuition said, stop, walk away, let it percolate. And what I accomplished in those 9, 10 months is I was able to disentangle my neural circuitry that has been immersed in business for decades, that thinks it knows a way to do things. And it's very hard to see that for yourself. I disentangled from that. I spent time in nature. I spent time pondering who I am. I spent time meditating. I spent time cooking. I just did whatever I could do. And I am incredibly privileged and fortunate to have been able to do that. Most people can't do that. But what it allowed me to do is to meet this work again fresh, without any preconceived notions. And that's part of what humanity is doing. Humanity is kind of breaking away from the paradigm and the ways we've always thought about doing things, so new
Mhm.
ways can break through those old neural circuits and start to inform new behaviors.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. So I am so excited to learn more about what these innate skills are that we need to go within. I love how you said that. I wanted to reiterate again that we need to discover and pull out and tap into within ourselves so that then we can bring that out into the world. So
Yeah.
let's get started. I'm excited.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go to the deepest within there is that I can imagine. And let's start with creative, because you mentioned creativity. And people do have very rigid ideas about what being creative is. But we forget that we started as a single cell. Literally, one cell started your body. And then you took over from there. I mean, your mom's the support mechanism, but your body took that first cell and split it in two, and then made more cells and made more cells and differentiated cells, and came up with this enormously complex, amazing structure called your body. And when I talk about accessing and unleashing potential, this is a good example that I have done this process where I take people through guided meditation to remember, what it is to be a single cell dividing and creating yourself. And that activates something innate. There is an innate creative potential that we all have. And it's not about drawing or painting, it's about building ourselves from within. It's about cutting your finger and your body automatically healing it. It's about having the power to choose how you interact with people. It's about a dynamic being that is influencing everything in his or her environment on an ongoing basis, much of which is unconscious. So when we become more conscious about creating ourselves, we become more conscious about how potently creative beings we are, we automatically activate that. So one way to understand this skill, and when I say we're creative, I don't mean like we're creative manifestors. I don't mean we're powerful manifestors. I'm not saying we're not. I'm just saying that's not the focus of this principle. This principle is really about anyone's potential to create their own thoughts, anyone's potential to create how they choose to move through the world. So, in working with this principle, we might say, "Hey, when you reach a problem, a problem with someone in your family, let's say, and you're feeling stressed, you go into a standard response. We all do that. We have a stress, and then we go into a typical response. So, once you feel that stress, take a beat and just say, "I am creative, and this person's creative too." And what you're doing is you're kind of getting below your typical psychological response and activating this really deep, powerful, potent source of new energy, new thinking, new dynamism that moves through your whole system. And your system is you and your body and your thinking. Your system is you and your spouse. Your system is you and your family. We forget that we live in systems. A family is a
Mhm.
system, or a friendship is a system. So when you bring that infusion of creative potential, you actually don't even have to work that hard to come up with a solution, because you've asked the right question of your being. How can I be more creative in this situation? Is a great question to ask. How can I allow this person to be more creative in this situation? How can we both access our co-creative potential? And that allows the juices to flow, and it allows not only your own being to get into a different state of mind, but it allows you to remember that you create with others. Lots of times when we face problems, especially those who've had some degree of spiritual training or read some books, you feel like you have the whole burden to solve problems on your own, because if you're creative, then you must create the solution. We never create solutions on our own, because we are always embedded in systems, in a family system, in a friend system, in a work system, in a state, in a country, and in all of humanity. We're embedded in all of that. And that's actually one of the principles, is or one of the skills, is to be empowered. And again, empowered has a lot of baggage that comes with it, what we think it means, but it simply means I value and engage all parts. So if you value and engage all parts, then you actually know who you are as a creative being, and you activate all the energy of a much larger dynamic to bring to problem solving, or simply connecting more deeply with people. So that's creative. That's how we
Mhm.
play with the creative principle. And
Mhm. Mhm. And what I like to take away from that too is this idea of being in the moment and checking in with yourself and reminding yourself of what you know to be true, that I am creative and that this other person is also creative, and then opening up the space for possibilities, right? That we don't have to know it all in that moment, that we can remain open and invite the endless possibilities to come into the present moment, instead of feeling like you have to know what the answer is all the time, as you said, or only seeing it from your point of view instead of being open to seeing it from multiple point of views. And by doing that, we actually allow more possibilities to come in, instead of saying, well, this is my expectation for how I think that this should work out. But we're often doing that and limiting the potential for how it could possibly turn out if we just opened ourselves up to like what the universe could potentially bring into the situation. But we don't often do that. And so the reminders of like giving yourself a moment, as you said, to remind yourself of the things that you are empowered, you are creative, and opening the space and inviting that into the situation.
Mhm. Yeah, and that can be quite terrifying. We get a sense of security by knowing in advance, like in a situation like this, knowing in advance what you're going to say, knowing, how I'm going to lay out the 12 skills, or how I usually do this. And I took that year to unlearn all that stuff, because what's most true is for me to follow the flow of this conversation. And this may sound a little airy fairy, but to connect with all the people who are going to watch this, and we don't know who they are yet. And we don't know what matters most to them yet. But if you allow yourself to have this kind of fantastical idea that you're a cell in this huge body, well, the cells in your body talk to each other all the time. The cell, your heart's beating. Are you telling it to beat? No, it's because you have this automatic functioning system. So if you think about humanity that way, that humanity is this automatic functioning system, or perhaps right now, this automatic dysfunctioning system that is emerging and learning how to be more functional, then it's worthy to pay attention in the moment to what feels right and true. So in this moment, it feels right and true to follow the conversation where it leads, as opposed to saying, okay, I'm presenting the 12 skills. I'm going to start here. I'm going to move there. I'm going to move there. That's all about me getting my needs as a communicator taken care of, or your needs as an interviewer taken care of, and maybe be tidier or more polished looking, but it's much more powerful and freeing, and it creates a resonance when you actually allow the vibrations of your connection to the rest of humanity to help inform your choices as you go. I'm not saying throw out all business practice by any stretch of the imagination. I'm saying
Mhm.
take that moment to feel what's true in any given moment. Does that make
Yes.
sense?
Absolutely, it makes sense. And that's like, even with the flow of the interview, I have, kind of some guiding questions with, maybe perhaps, the direction or theme of, where I want what messaging I may want to like get across, but also it is just a guiding thing because you do have to leave yourself open to what comes up in the moment through the conversation that needs to, with what you need to share and what I need to share. And so we have to leave it open to possibility. Absolutely. And
Yeah,
so
abs
if we have only like 1 or 2 minutes left, do you feel like you would like to maybe just like say what the other skills are without really diving into them?
yeah, absolutely. I'll just go through them as the I statements that they are. So I create myself, I know myself, I manage myself, I adapt to stress, I respond to change, I coordinate diverse parts, I maintain balance, I value and engage all parts, I openly share information, I convert things, I conserve what works, and I correct what doesn't work. So those are the 12 skills as I statements.
And
And
these are
those are things
statements.
that we all have capacity. It's already in us. We just have to remember them and learn how to use them again.
Mhm. And isn't in other parts that we see this in nature too, right? That it wasn't just that these are just skills that we as humans have, but we as humans in a microcosm of nature and of the world. Is that true that she came about this knowledge of these skills through her observation of all living organisms, let's say?
Yes. Yes, they're called healthy living systems, and all living organisms follow the same path. And they either emerge from crisis to thrive by being this, or they go extinct. So yeah, and when we say, we're part of nature too. We are nature. I have to keep retraining myself. We're not part
Mhm.
of nature. We are nature. So that's part of learning who we are and what our place is, and coordinating all those diverse parts not only happens in the body and in relationships, but as we are resident and within nature. So yes, it does all come from that.
Mm, thank you. So I really want to I thank you for being on the show today. If people want to connect with you afterwards to learn more about your program and working with you, how can they do that?
They can go to the website. It's www.forevolution.com. And there are any number of places where, for coaching, or the Center for Corporate Evolution, that you can click and send me an email, and I will get back to you.
Thank you. So, again, thank you for being on the show, sharing more about the 12 skills that we innately have within us that can help us to move through crisis situations and thrive and be the powerful creators that we are meant to be in this lifetime.
Thank you, Teresa. It's really nice talking with you. I enjoy speaking with you every time we do it.
I'd like to leave you with the thought for the day. The first skill we talked about today was creativity. All living things have this innate creative ability that allows us to create and co-create with others. We live in a world of interdependence where our human existence depends on nature and one another. We can see how our natural instinct to create is in everything we do. But some people say, I'm not creative. But you are. Creativity doesn't just mean drawing and painting, making music, writing, baking, etc. We are, in fact, creating all the time. From the fresh cup of coffee you made, that amazingly tasty meal you created with the ingredients you selected, the original outfit you put together for the day, the way you styled your hair or did your makeup, the work you might have completed, the grocery list you wrote down are all creations we do on a daily basis that we don't even think about. Our natural instinct to create also has us at times taking on more than we can handle. I know I'm guilty of this, where we're being pulled in many directions, creating things that weren't there just days before. But even after those moments when we might have taken a needed break from the hustle and bustle of life, the feeling to explore new things or to change things up again takes hold of us once again. Our innate curiosity also urges us to move and experience all that life has to offer. There are so many things we can explore, learn about, and try. I encourage you to make the most of your time here on earth because tomorrow isn't promised. To do and create what your heart desires without limitation or fear. Like our creator, source energy, God, the universe, or whatever word you prefer to use, who created us in its likeness, knew that we would continue to create and experience the joy of creation for ourselves. So, what will you create today that wasn't there before your beautiful and unique mind, body, and spirit decided to create it? Thank you for joining me here today on the Steps to Happiness show, and I look forward to being here with you again next week.
To connect with Teresa Greco after the show for coaching, workshops, and speaking engagements, you can visit her website at teresagreco.ca or by email at stepstotruehappiness@gmail.com or follow her on Instagram at TeresaGreco_Steps to Happiness or on Facebook at Steps to True Happiness with Teresa Greco.